All right, diving in. Today, it's DevOps security. And judging by what you folks have sent in, research, articles, even some personal notes, this is hitting close to home for a lot of you.
It is a big deal.
Absolutely. In today's landscape, you can't be a software company and not have this top of mind.
No, not at all. Software, it's not just code anymore, it's how businesses operate.
It's the backbone, yeah.
Yeah, and a tiny vulnerability. Huge problem.
Oh, for sure. We're not just talking data breaches. This is full-on operational meltdown territory.
You got it.
Okay, so for folks tuning in, maybe newer to this, help us bridge the gap. Traditional security, we kind of get it, but what's different here?
Yeah.
Why is this a whole new ballgame?
All right, picture this. A factory, doors wide open, alarms are busted, safety out the window. Recipe for disaster, right?
Okay, got a visual. So our software is the factory. The vulnerabilities of like those open doors, faulty alarms.
Bingo! And the thing is, companies like Microsoft, they're not messing around.
Taking it up a notch.
Red-blue team war games, they call it. Constant internal security scrimmage.
Ooh, war games. Now we're talking. A lot more exciting than, your typical security training. So break it down. What's happening in these games?
You got two sides, red team, blue team.
Classic.
Red team, the attackers, top-notch engineers, pen testers, they think like the bad guys.
So like ethical hackers, but on Microsoft's payroll to attack their own systems.
Precisely. Then you have blue team, the defenders, DevOps pros, monitoring rapid response. Their job is to hold down the fort.
Epic digital tug of war, huh? But what's the point? Who's trying to win?
It's not about winning. It's about finding the weaknesses before the real bad guys do.
Proactive security, constantly putting yourselves to the test.
Yeah.
Smart.
Exactly.
But I gotta imagine these war games get kind of chaotic. Is it just everyone hacking randomly?
Nope. Very structured. Red team doesn't just attack blindly. They're analyzing the code, using tools to find weak points.
Like a real attacker would do their homework, yeah.
Exactly.
So in these early stages, what kind of vulnerabilities are they looking for?
Fundamental stuff, but you'd be surprised how common it is. Say they find an API key, hard-coded in a public GitHub repo.
Uh-oh.
Simple oversight, right. But that one key could give them access to sensitive data, maybe even control of entire systems.
Yeah, those small things can be the most dangerous for sure.
Absolutely. Building that security mindset from day one.
Okay, so red team finds these basic issues. I'm guessing blue team's got to scramble to patch them up.
You got it. And as blue team gets better, red team ups their game. Cross-site scripting, deserialization exploits, they get tricky.
Hold up. Deserialization exploits. For folks who might not know, what's that about?
Sure. Deserialization, taking data that's been stored, converting it back to a usable object in a program. An attacker can mess with that data stream, sneak in malicious code, and once it's deserialized.
Boom, they're in, like a virus disguised as harmless data.
Exactly. And it keeps escalating. They even start attacking the engineering systems themselves, the tools used to build the software.
Whoa, going for the heart of the operation. How does blue team keep up?
It's a learning curve. They harden defenses, put in stronger controls. They set up logging systems to track everything so they can investigate if something fishy happens.
Like digital detectives, huh? Every clue matters.
Exactly. Ideally, by the end, they've got real-time monitoring, stopping attacks as they happen.
That's wild. So it's this constant back and forth, both sides pushing each other to get better.
You got it. But, given expert hackers free reign in your systems, a little nerve-wracking, right?
Yeah, I can imagine. Lots of potential for things to go sideways.
That's why they've got rules of engagement.
Keeping it civilized. Makes sense. What kind of rules are we talking about?
Well, no crashing critical systems, no touching customer data, no weakening existing security. Ethical hacking, not digital demolition.
So they can find the holes, but no real damage.
Right. No data destruction either. And anything sensitive they find, passwords, vulnerabilities, that's confidential.
Find the weak spot, but don't expose yourself further. Got it.
And then there's social engineering. Targeting employees directly, trying to trick them.
Like those phishing emails we all get.
Exactly, if they trick someone. Microsoft doesn't name names.
Smart. Protect people's privacy. Focus on learning, not blame.
Precisely. It's about everyone getting better together. And when it comes to physical stuff, trying to get into secure areas,
Sneaking around.
They can be creative, but no harassment, no breaking the law.
Okay, so there are boundaries. That's good to know. But this all sounds expensive. Microsoft's huge, they've got resources. How could a smaller company, a startup, pull this off?
Great question. And it's something we'll dig into more later. The good news is, even startups can adapt these principles.
I'm all ears. It seems like anyone could benefit from this kind of proactive security.
Absolutely. We'll talk about how to tailor it for startups, resources, and all right after this. You're right, it can seem like a lot, especially for smaller companies. But war games, they're not just about finding the holes, it's what you do with that information.
Right, not just playing capture the flag, it's got to lead to action.
Yeah, at Microsoft, it's all documented, a prioritized backlog, they call it.
Sounds kind of like a to-do list,
Yeah,
but for security vulnerabilities.
exactly. And with SLAs, service level agreements attached. So there's a deadline for fixing stuff based on how serious it is.
Makes sense. Bigger problem, faster fix.
You got it. Major threat, immediate action, minor thing, maybe a 2-sprint deadline.
For our listeners who are in the agile world, that makes sense. Okay, so they got this backlog, they're prioritizing. What else happens with this info?
Transparency's key. They share a report. The whole company sees it. What vulnerabilities were found, what lessons were learned.
So it's not about blame, it's about everyone learning from it.
Exactly. A more secure environment for everyone.
And Microsoft, they've been doing this for a while. I bet they've got some good intel on common weaknesses and how to handle them.
Oh, yeah. One thing they've learned. Phishing attacks. Way bigger threat than people think.
People clicking on bad links, giving away passwords. It's crazy how easy it is.
It is. You'd think by now everyone would know better, but these attacks, they're getting sneakier.
So what's the defense?
Microsoft, they say, limit production access, enforce 2-factor authentication.
Yeah.
Simple stuff, but it makes a difference.
Makes it a lot harder to break in, even if you fool someone. What other lessons have they learned?
Protecting access to the engineering system, that's huge. The tools they use to build and release software, it's the control center.
If someone gets in there, it's game over.
Pretty much. And then defense in depth. This is an old concept, but it's super relevant to DevOps.
Okay, defense in depth. Break that down for us.
Imagine a castle, right? Moat, thick walls, guard towers. Even if someone gets past one layer, there's more to stop them.
Multiple layers of security, so if one fails, you're not totally exposed.
Exactly. It makes it way harder for attackers. Could be 2-factor authentication, intrusion detection, even just segmenting your network, isolating critical systems.
Like a security maze, the attacker's got to work for it.
You got it. And then something Microsoft learned the hard way, never mix production and test environments.
That sounds bad. Why is that so important?
Contamination risk. If there's a vulnerability in your test environment and it's connected to your production systems, the attacker's in.
Like letting a virus loose in a lab and it spreads to the whole building.
Exactly. Keep those environments separate no matter what.
This is all fascinating stuff. But let's bring it down to earth a bit. What about smaller companies, startups? They don't have Microsoft's budget.
Good point. But adapting these practices, it doesn't have to mean a huge team or tons of money. It's about being smart.
So what can a startup DO practically to get this war game approach going without breaking the bank?
First step, security audit. Figure out where you stand, what are your biggest weaknesses. You don't need fancy consultants. There's open source tools, lots of resources out there.
Take stock of your defenses before you start wargaming.
Exactly. Then, once you know your weak spots, you can start thinking like an attacker. And here's the good news for startups. You don't need a huge red team.
So a small group, even a few people, can do this effectively.
Absolutely. Find people who are passionate about security, who understand your systems. Doesn't have to be seasoned experts. Different perspectives are key.
So it's more about the mindset than years of experience.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to bring in outside help. Consultants, experts, you can even do bug bounty programs. Get the wider community involved.
Like crowdsourcing your security testing.
Yeah.
Smart. Okay, we've got the audit. We're building the lean red team. What other advice for startups?
Focus. What are your biggest risks? Don't try to do everything at once. If you're an e-commerce company, your payment system, customer data, that's where you start.
Makes sense. Focus your energy where it matters most.
Exactly. And remember, small steps make a difference. 2-factor authentication, keeping your software up to date, training your employees, those are big wins.
It's about making security part of the culture. Everyone's on board.
Precisely. And the cool thing about war games, it's constant learning. The more you do it, the better you get.
This has been great.
Yeah.
We talked about why DevOps security is so important, how Microsoft's doing it, and how startups can adapt those ideas.
Yeah, it's been a good conversation. And this is just the beginning. There's so much happening in this space. It's constantly evolving.
Absolutely. And speaking of innovation in DevOps security, I've got some exciting news.
Oh,
We're launching a new series in November, founder interview series, and our first guest is Brittany Greenfield, founder of Wabi.
wow, Brittany Greenfield. That's a great choice. Wabi's doing amazing work in DevSecOps. I'm really interested to hear her take on how startups can build security in from day one.
Me too. She's got a ton of experience. I think our listeners will get a lot out of it. And speaking of listeners, make sure you subscribe to Kabir's Tech Dives podcast and YouTube channel so you don't miss this interview or any of our other deep dives.
We'll be back with more soon, but for now, stay curious and stay secure.
You know, as we wrap this up, thinking about these war games, it really hits home that human element. It's not just about the tech, the firewalls. It's about the people, that mindset of always staying ahead.
Yeah, thinking like the attacker, always testing, always learning.
And for startups, moving fast, taking risks, that proactive approach is even more crucial.
They may not have Microsoft's resources, but they can be more agile, more innovative with their security.
Build it into their DNA from the start.
Exactly.
And that's where these war game ideas, even scaled down, can be so powerful. Start small. Focus on the big risks. Get creative.
Tailor it to what you've got. There's no one right answer.
We've talked a lot about the big companies, how they're tackling this. But what about you listening in right now? What's one thing you can do today to up your security game?
That's the question, right? Doesn't have to be huge. Turn on two-factor authentication maybe, or go all in, do a full security audit.
Whatever it is, do something. Don't wait for a breach to happen. Be proactive.
Make it a priority.
Yeah. In today's world, security, it's everyone's responsibility.
Absolutely.
Well said. And to stay on top of all this, the latest in DevOps security, make sure you're subscribed to Kabir's Tech Dives, podcast, and YouTube.
We'll be back with more deep dives soon. But until then, stay curious and stay secure.